Well, sometimes the examples that I give might seem kind of contrived, but here's a maybe more realistic kind of example that shows the need that sometimes you really can't do anything else other than add some kind of active component to make the system work. So we might have a some sort of sensor producing 1 volt RMS. So that actually would be kind of a high voltage level, but a milli is, so for instance, an antenna, or it might be microvolts, or a thermocouple is a few millivolts. But if we make it 1 volt, the calculations are a little easier. And if it has a high output resistance, we'll say it's 1 mega ohm. It's not so unrealistic. We're just saying that it can't produce much current. And it could also be that we'd like to drive a low resistance load. What if we wanted to drive a load of 1 ohm? So we wanted to put a load here. Oops. Redo. Change color. Okay. So we have a load resistance of 10 ohms. That mismatch will be a disaster for trying to see voltages. So what is the output voltage there? What do we see? So the output, V out, would just be here. And we have simply a divider. So V out is equal to that divider ratio equation. V out is equal to 10 over 10 plus 1 e to the 6 times that 1 volt. And that works out to 10 e to the minus 6, or 10 microvolts. So we had this nice strong 1 volt output, and it turned into this measly 10 microvolt source for voltage when we tried to drive a low load. And maybe an even more telling thing is, what's the power out? So we could find that as V out squared divided by R. So hopefully this already looks bad to you. That's 10 e to the minus 6 squared. And that's over 10 ohms. That's 1 e to the minus 13. Six squared, so 6 plus 6 is 1 e to the minus 12 divided by 10, 1 e to the minus 13 watts. So that's 0.1 picowatts or 100 femtowatts. Not much power. And the voltage gain, I could just see what's going on over there. V out over Vs is equal to 10 e to the minus 6 over 1, or 10 e to the minus 6 volts per volt. It's not an amplifier, but the total gain of that system. And 20 log of 10 to the minus 6 is minus 100 dB. And if you have worked with RF systems that use dB, then that might sound like a pretty big problem. Minus 100 dB. We're a long ways below where we started with. We've lost a huge amount. This is the kind of thing that you could fix, though. Well, let's do one other thing. What's the input power? The power in, so we have power out and power in. So this would be, again, V out, V in squared. So 1 squared divided by that resistance, 1e to the 6 ohms. That would be 1e to the minus 6 watts. So that's not good, right? We put in a microwatt and we got out femtowatts. It's just a terrible loss. We can fix this situation or improve it greatly if we put a buffer. So a buffer could be something that looks like this. Gain of 1. So 1e to the 6, 1 volt, 10, and we have this buffer here that has a no voltage gain. It doesn't increase the voltage at all. It simply reproduces whatever it saw, it gives it. So if we analyze that, let's see on the original one, analyze that, we'd have a circuit and we might have an actual voltage buffer, might have an input resistance, let's say 1 mega ohm. I'll add those in. And we have a source resistance here of 1 mega ohm, and we have 1 volt on the source. And if it was connected to a buffer, then a buffer is an amplifier with a gain of 1. So we'd have 1 times VI, and VI is over here now. It's an amplifier system. And we might have an output resistance of 10 ohms on this amplifier if we matched the output. And so we have a 10 ohm there and 10 ohms here. And we have V out there. So then what do we get if we go through that? So we now need to find the input voltage. That's by the divider again. So that's 1e to the 6 over 1e to the 6 plus 1e to the 6 times 1, or that's 0.5 volts. Right? That's what we got. And that 0.5 volts would be reproduced exactly by this voltage source. So it'll have an output of 1.5 volts. Excuse me. So the out, we've got this 0.5 volts on this voltage source, but we have another divider right here. And to find V out, we need to use this divider. So it's 10 over 10 plus 10 times 0.5, which would be 0.25 volts. So our input was 0.5 and our output is 0.25. So that's much better. We've still lost, but we haven't lost anything like what we had. So we actually now have a voltage gain of V out over Vs is equal to 0.25 over 1. and that's 0. Volt per volt. Excuse me, and that would be equal to minus 12 dB on the dB scale, 20 log of 0.25. And the power out is now 0.25 squared divided by 10, which is 6.25 milliwatts. And our power gain is plus 38 dB. So we went from losing a tremendous amount of voltage to not losing near as much, only 12 dB. We still lost something, but it's not near the kind of disaster that we had. So I'll give a short practice over just that input issue, just so you can practice a little again. But that's kind of a more practical look at what would go on. And like I said, actually that input voltage would be, like a millivolt or 100 microvolts, but we'll still have that same huge loss if we try to drive a low impedance load. So we need an amplifier that just simply has a voltage gain of 1, a buffer.